I'm Jerry Gordon, a senior editor here at the New English Review. In a way, is my good friend and contributor to the New English Review, Nidra Poller, an American expatriate who lives in Paris. And Nidra, you're here today to give us kind of a summary, a précis, if you will, of your presentation at this New English Symposium. What was your talk about, and what were the high points that you could recall for us?
It was a message that I didn't necessarily want to bring. Okay. Because in essence, what I said is that when I first came to the United States to tell about what was happening in Europe, essentially the Islamization and the concomitant anti-Semitism, this message was very welcome. And at the same time, Americans said, that's the thing in Europe. Europe is finished. Get out of Europe. They've always been that way. This obscured for me the fact that the same thing was happening in the United States. And after the election of Barack Hussein Obama, I find myself in this position that my message is not as welcome because I'm saying to Americans, what have you done? You were listening to me when I told about Europe, but you put the wrong scenario on it. You did not draw the message. Now, I think that we who try to tell the rest of the world about this danger, I think we should be self-critical. So I think we should say, if we couldn't prevent the election of Barack Obama, then what did we do wrong? Of course, single-handed, we can't hold back this tide in history. But we should ask of ourselves to be doing it so well that we almost succeeded. I don't think in this case that we can be satisfied. And as we go forward, it's the same thing. Little criticisms will not do it. This sort of hum, of pointing out his faux pas, that will not do it. And of course, the essential thing I'm telling Americans is that they elected a tyrant that was an electoral coup d'etat. And now you have a tyrant. When you're dealing with a tyrant, it's a different story from dealing with a president you don't like.
Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what the message is today.
Yes. And, I think it was 2003, I published a long article and commentary.
Right.
The title was Betrayed by Europe, an Expatriate's Lament. That was the editor's title. My title was Meet Me at Starbucks. And my article started in Starbucks.
Right.
Without identifying the person, it was actually James Fallows. James Fallows had written the Atlantic monthly article about the Adour affair. Typical of what I spoke about today, serious journalism. You set your goalposts here and here. You exclude the extremists there. You exclude the extremists there. And truth is not that difficult thing to find. Truth is someplace down the middle. Mm-hmm. And so I had this conversation with him at Starbucks, and there was a whole side thing, my typical thing about me sitting on this hard, big chair at Starbucks in my fashionable skirt that had a silk lining, a long skirt. In those days, that was the fashion. And I would keep slipping, sliding, and then I'd have to, get my ground back. That was my, this is always my situation where I so much admired the United States again, though I had left very angry against the United States. And at the same time, I couldn't even sit on the chair. And it was supposed to end with the first Starbucks at Opéra in Paris.
Right.
And of course, if that had been the title, then you would get the movement back to Starbucks, because what I was dealing with in France is now what you have to deal with in the United States. And I asked myself, would any public official in France say what Mayor Bloomberg said about the Ground Zero Mosque? I don't think so. Many sins are committed every day in Europe, but I don't think so. And that act of submission, it's so enormous. Who would have thought in September 18th, 2001, when I flew back to Paris, who would have ever imagined that in the city of New York, they would want to submit to Islam to this point. But a very good specialist on Islam in Israel told me during the campaign, he said, this is how it works. First, they hit, right? 9/11, then Dawa, and that's Obama. And I tell you, not only Pajamas Media firing me, but all kinds of media that I was working with, they were afraid of my Obama articles. Yes. And I don't think that, it's true. Only people who were considered, flaming extremists were telling the real story about Obama. And the nominally conservative media, although the mainstream media were doing something that never happened before in the United States. They were in the tank for a candidate and they had absolutely no ethics. But the conservative media were all afraid of hitting sharply because whoever is backing him, Obama, they knew what they were doing, right? They picked what they thought, what people think is a black man. To me, he's not. But they picked somebody, they could package him as a black man. So anything you said against him was, be careful, be careful. And then they played hide and seek with his Muslim thing. And that's, as I said, with the LA Times tape, that is telling people at the same time you're telling them what they're doing, at the same time you're letting them pretend they're not doing it. That's what dictatorships do. And that's how they get the population to go along with them for doing the most horrible atrocities. And that's what happened in Europe when they exterminated the half the Jews in Europe.
Right.
Is that they would sort of tell people what they were doing and then they would deny they were doing it. And so they appeal to something that's very evil in human beings. We have to find a way to appeal to something that's not only good, but to something that's intelligent. And some people think we should find, slogans like they have slogans and use the methods they use. No. We have to use the highest methods to get to the intelligence of people, so that they'll start to resist. And, but as you see, Jews in France are great Zionists because they're living with that Islamization. Jews in the United States, though they heard about it in France, they didn't understand. So they just said, how can you live there? Come here.
So to end this conversation, let me ask you.
Let's end this, but
we're
interrupted.
Well, it's a conversation to be continued, but let me ask you for a response to a question. When you and I first met back about 2003 in Connecticut, I believe, you had a message about the Islamization in Europe. And from this discussion, you say it's turned 180 degrees so that basically the Europeans are now concerned about Islamization here.
Oh, perhaps not, the general public.
Right.
But the people who are aware of what is happening in Europe are very concerned. And, Europeans are always thinking, maybe we'll have to leave, where will we go, right? If they don't win this battle. So Jewish Europeans are thinking of going to Israel. But there are non-Jewish Europeans who are also anti-jihad. And they were thinking of going to the United States. And suddenly they say, now what do we do?
There's a dilemma. On that note, I want to thank you for this preliminary conversation.